it's Drybear. We have finished our overall best weapons list, going over the base stats and what the weapons offer, and yesterday we covered the Thunder Cage as an individual ultimate weapon. And I want to continue finishing out the SMGs before we move on to other weapons. There's been a lot of requests for ultimate weapons as well, but let's finish the SMGs while we're on the topic. And today I want to talk about what I'm going to call the Rapid SMG. There are 4 SMGs in the game that scale incredibly well with things like maximum rounds, reload time, and fire rate. Because they are so heavily fixated on this sort of statistic setup, then building around that makes them infinitely stronger. And you can even argue that I would say that a single target rapid built Blue Blood Bloomer can actually outscale a single target Thunder Cage in almost every possible situation because it's built for that sort of thing. So today let's talk about the Rapid SMGs, what you want to build for them. I have on screen the one sheet going over all the options for this. And because these aren't highly specialized weapons like the Thunder Cage, you have some options that you can go through depending on how you want to build the weapon. First, let's go through the core modules. This is for the Blue Blood Bloomer, Albinism, Devil's Call, and Alter Ego if you want to use any of those SMGs. Of those, the Blue Blood Bloomer is absolutely the strongest, but you can use any of them for flavor if that's what you're looking for. Your best stats, if you look in the bottom left corner, weak point, firearm attack, and fire rate are global scalars. Those are applied one-to-one to the weapon, so there's almost always going to show up at the top of the list for priority and stat priority because they get applied in full value. There's no calculations required for those. Those are always going to be built up on that. But because these are fast firing, fast emptying weapons, you want to focus a lot on time to empty and reload time for these kinds of weapons. So after those 3 stats, your priority is going to be around maximum rounds and reload time. None of these weapons really scale well with crit damage or crit percent, and we'll do a separate video going over crit SMGs because there are 2 SMGs that you can run pure critical if you'd like, the Thunder Cage and the Firefly, because they have decent base stats for scaling off of crit, but these are your fast SMGs, the ones that unload as much ammo as possible, which means that your core is going to focus on those main stats. So you're going to pick up weak point sight, of course, and have aiming. This gives you 2 modules that you can use to max out your weak point damage. Weak point damage, if you can manage to do it outside of launchers, is still the best scaling stat in the entire game, and being able to trigger that for this is going to be really good. And you'll see once we add in our special mod, Real Life Fighter, these weapons become absolutely ridiculous. In fact, if you max out a Real Life Fighter and you have some extra fire rate and reload time and max mag time for like a Blue Blood Bloomer on this, you can do ridiculous single target damage with these. So we'll build off of that. But I would say part of the core is going to be weak point. Then you also want your 2 main firearm attack builds. Most weapons are going to use rifling reinforcement of blue, which doesn't have a group on it, and action and reaction for that. Which is a good point to talk about how the group system works in your weapons for the First Descendant. So a couple things, I'm just going to cover this probably in every weapons video just so we don't leave anyone behind, but you can put in different modules onto your weapon. However, you can't double up a group category. So if you look at these weapons here, so let's put on Sharpshooter. You can see at the very bottom of Sharpshooter, it has the lettering ATK. And if we look at it, the group on it is ATK. What that means is that I can't add another module that has group ATK on it. Like if I try to put pinpoint shot, can't do it. If I try to put antimatter, can't do it. So you want to max out these groups, and the reason they have these is to create an exclusivity to make sure that you have to choose on those stats. You don't just pump the main stat that's good on your weapon. You're forced to create other options, but all of these ATKs are not going to be here. But keep in mind that just because these are ones that increase firearm attack for the ATK category, it doesn't mean you don't have other options, right? Because notice that rifling reinforcement, the blue standard module, does increase firearm attack, but it doesn't belong to the ATK group. So that's what's preventing you from stacking those together. The other thing you want to be aware of is that you can increase the max capacity of your weapons by using energy activators. You can increase that max HP. You can also assign module socket types. The way this works is kind of like forming or advancing your weapon with the catalyst. You can specify a slot and specify a kind of module that goes in that slot. You'll notice that all of these have a socket type, and then once it's locked in as that socket type, if you use the correct socket type, it's a 50% reduction in the capacity cost of that. So not only can you increase the max capacity of weapons up to 80 to max them out, but you can also lower the cost of certain modules by restricting the choice that goes in. And by the way, if you put the wrong module socket type in a formatted slot, you're going to have an an increase in capacity. So you really limit yourself, but when you know what you're building and you want to kind of keep it that way and invest in that weapon, you can make it more and more efficient and start fitting more of these modules inside of it. So we want to maximize firearm attack. We want to maximize weak point. Those are two of your best scalers in the entire game. And one of the best ways to do that is going to be using the listing here. And I actually have the weighting of these based on how much value. So if we use Real Life Fighter as the benchmark for the rest of these modules, the percentage shows you how much of that benchmark you are getting from these to show what contribution they have. Keep in mind, you can only have one special mod, so it's not like you're going to run Real Life Fighter and Firing Fiesta, but if you wanted to, you could run like Action Reaction, Firing Fiesta, have aiming, that sort of thing. So again, getting this amount of firearm attack is very good, especially for these fast firing weapons, and then you want to run Have Aiming, Weak Point Sight, Rifling Reinforcement, and Fire Rate Up. Optionally, you can also run Expand General Magazine and Rounds Conversion if you feel like you're chewing through too much ammo, or you just want to use this weapon more often as an expending weapon just to burn through mobs or burn through a weak point on a target. Then you're actually going to get a lot of value out of Expand General Magazine, Recycling Genius, and Expand Weapon Charge. Adding rounds to a fast-firing weapon means that you're extending the time to empty and you're keeping more uptime on the insane DPS that these SMGs have, and reducing the reload time has a big impact on that as well, because it means that you can get back to firing, keeping your uptime. Realistically, we can talk about DPS from a single magazine, but in every case, in actuality, you are actually firing at a target for 10, 20, 30, 40, 45, 50, 60 seconds in a row. And so your reload time matters and your time getting back into uptime matters. And we can modify it with these specific weapons, which scale well with maximum rounds and reload. And if we're getting really technical, you also want to think about animation canceling your reloads as well. This happens in every game. You start a reload animation, and then when the reload finishes, you get your ammo back. However, for every weapon in the game, there is a period from the start of the reload to the end of the reload where the ammo actually shows up in the weapon, which means once that ammo appears, the finishing animation is no longer needed, and so you can cancel that animation when the reload shows up. All of the cancel animation timings are different for every weapon in the game, but on average, you can kind of get to between 50 and 75%, and you'll be done with that and get your max ammo back. So if you wait to about 50%, you see I was like 45 there. It was a little bit early, but if I go a little bit further, some weapons are higher. Then there's this Devil's Call right here. It's closer to like 70%. Thunder Cage is much better at like 50% of the reload, but you can interrupt that reload and get that ammo back a little bit sooner to maximize your offense from that. Keep in mind, to interrupt reload, you have to either use your grappling hook, use an ability, or use a roll in order to interrupt that is the best ways to do it. And you can probably just use roll most of the time, as you'll probably want to be moving around the fight anyways. Now, once you have your core of setting up these different stats for your fast firing SMGs, and you think about how you want to manage your ammo and how much you want to be spending on the SMG, I would pick up one of the ultimate optional pickups here. Firing Fiesta is quite good. You're at maximum capacity when you fully upgrade it. 15-second cooldown for 3 seconds added to your time to empty because it doesn't consume ammo after reloading. So it's like a 20% uptime on the reload buff, which is really good. The Real Life Fighter is actually the best mod that you can put on a weapon like this, but there's something that's really important to know about this module. So the way Real Life Fighter works is that when you hit a weak point with an attack, it increases your firearm attack, and that stacks up 10 times. And then when you miss a weak point, you lose 2 stacks, which means it takes 10 successful weak point shots to fully stack it, and 5 unsuccessful weak point shots to drop it. The downside with this sort of weapon, a very fast-firing SMG, is that you can build stacks very quickly, but you can also lose them very quickly. And you'll notice with some of these, especially the Blue Blood Bloomer, is that when you're actually hitting a weak point, you can get up to those stacks almost instantly. And then when you miss the weak point, like if you go off the weak point for a second, you fire so many rounds that it drops off fast. So it's a positive in that you can very quickly get Real Life Fighter stacked up, but it's a negative that if you're not paying attention or something moves, you can very easily lose that benefit, which I think Real Life Fighter is an excellent pickup for these kind of weapons, especially on Void Intercept. Like when you stagger a Colossi and they kneel and you have access to one of their weak points, you can walk up very close range with a Blue Blood Bloomer or something like that and just unload insane, ungodly amounts of DPS right into the weak point with Real Life Fighter and just absolutely shred them. Then you can back up and that sort of thing. So it is going to be your biggest jump in DPS, but you have to keep in mind that you can very easily lose all of your stacks as soon as you move off of that weak point, so you want to pay attention to. So I think that's more of a personal choice on whether or not you want to get get the big, you know, high risk, high reward from real life fighter and you're planning to use that for a certain situation. But if you want something a little bit more reasonable, Firing Fiesta and Sweeping Squad are both great choices for the special mods for these kind of fast firing weapons, because you'll get a very consistent value out of them. Next, I want to talk about the Consume Magazines and Reload Expert. Because these are super fast firing weapons, the more you extend their time to empty by adding more rounds, and the more you reduce their reload time, you get more value and more DPS out of them. So Reload Expert and Consume Magazines are optional. If you can manage the reload or you are canceling your reloads properly, you won't really need these kind of extra bonuses, but they will give you an overall DPS increase, especially if you're not canceling your reloads there by rolling or doing that sort of thing. The other thing that's worth mentioning is some weapons are highly specialized that will focus on building a very specific build, and in this game, some weapons aren't. And I would say that these weapons fall into the second category, in that you can actually change these weapons on the fly. So what some people do is they will actually catalyze maybe 6 to 8 of the slots of the modules for that weapon to reduce the cost, and then they leave open like 4 to 2 slots available for them to swap in different options. And fast firing weapons that have high skill, like if you run real life fighter with action and reaction, you have so much firearm attack and these weapons fire so quickly already that running elemental bonuses is actually a great option as well. And so again, to use the elements properly, it's a personal choice, because you'd have to swap in and out elements depending on what boss you're fighting. Every boss has a weakness to a certain element, so you'd have to swap them in and out. But these are good candidates for that kind of playstyle because they scale so well off their base stats specifically. So you could run enhancement for a specific element, but you'd have to swap it by the boss or by the elite that you're going against. If you didn't want to do that, you could just add in, you know, like expand general magazine rounds converting, or you could do reload expert on top of that just to round out the extra bit here. But it's more about how you want to play that weapon and how you want to play that playstyle. So those are the rapid SMGs. There's still one more SMG or 2 more SMGs we haven't covered. We haven't covered Python and we haven't covered Firefly, but I'm going to take Firefly and Thunder Cage, put them together for a crit specific build that you can run if you really wanted to do more of a crit style SMG. Both of those can be run that way, and then we'll do a separate video for Python because there's going to be some other things that go. Each ultimate has its own specific style that we'll want to make sure that we maximize. And that's it for the rapid SMGs. Let me know which weapon we should cover next in the First Descendant down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.